So imagine you're looking at two identical salespeople, and I mean identical in every metric that human resources can possibly measure.
Right, like on paper, they are the exact same person.
Exactly. They're working the exact same territory. They have the same educational background, same degrees. They even scored identically on their, baseline intelligence and aptitude tests when they got hired.
And they probably work roughly the same hours, right?
Yeah, they do. But then the end of the year rolls around, and you look at the numbers. One of them has pulled in $12,000. The other has pulled in $60,000.
Wow. That's a massive, inexplicable gap in performance.
A 5x multiplier.
Yeah.
It makes no sense on the surface. And today, we are going to tear down the exact psychological architecture that creates that gap.
I love this because it completely shatters those comforting little algorithms we were all taught growing up.
What do you mean by algorithms?
Well, we're fed this idea that career trajectories and life in general really are mathematically proportional. Like, you put in a certain amount of sweat, you apply your baseline IQ, and the universe just spits out this predictable linear result.
Oh, absolutely. Work hard, get good grades, get the exact proportional reward.
Right, but then you get into the real world and you see this landscape of achievement that is completely baffling. I mean, you look around the office or your industry and you see people who don't seem any smarter than you, who aren't, working themselves into an early grave, and yet they are achieving these outsized, massive results.
It is the absolute definition of a meritocratic illusion. The input simply does not always match the output in the way we've been conditioned to expect.
No, it doesn't. And the variable isn't raw intellect. It isn't a silver spoon.
Yeah.
And it certainly isn't luck.
And that is exactly what we're going to decode today. So welcome to today's deep dive.
It's great to be here.
For the learner out there listening right now, whether you are, prepping for a massive career pivot, or trying to lead a team out of a frustrating slump, or maybe you're just insanely curious about the actual mechanics of human potential.
Which is all of us, hopefully.
Right. Our mission today is to cut straight through the motivational fluff. We are diving into a comprehensive analysis of the research and frameworks laid out in David J. Schwartz's landmark work, The Magic of Thinking Big.
And I want to clarify right up front, this isn't just a collection of feel-good platitudes. It's a rigorous psychological teardown of the high achievers operating system.
Okay, so let's unpack this right out of the gate, going back to those two salespeople.
Yeah.
Because that is a real case study from the material we are looking at today.
Yeah, the Harry the salesman story.
Exactly. So Picture a corporate sales meeting. The vice president of marketing is up on stage, and he brings up his top representative. Let's just call him Harry.
Okay, Harry.
The VP points out that Harry is earning just under $60,000 a year, while the rest of the team is averaging $12,000. So naturally, the VP asks the crowd the questions we would all ask. Right?
Like, is he a genius?
Right. Is Harry 5 times smarter? No. The personnel tests show he is dead average.
Did he work 5 times harder?
Actually, the report showed Harry took more time off than the rest of the team.
Oh, wow. That's frustrating for everyone else in the room.
I'm sure it was. Better territory. No. Better health. No. Harry is the most astonishingly average guy you could possibly imagine.
But the output is a 5x multiplier. So what is the hidden variable?
Right.
What's fascinating here is the core revelation the executive delivers to the team. The difference isn't brains and it isn't sweat. The difference is that Harry simply thought 5 times bigger.
It sounds almost too simple, doesn't it? I mean, I can hear the collective eye roll from anyone who has ever been handed a, cheesy motivational poster.
Yeah. Just think big. Believe in yourself.
Exactly. But the material we are analyzing today drills down into this deeply. The size of a person's thinking literally determines the size of their bank account, their happiness, and their overall satisfaction in life.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it means our internal cognitive boundaries dictate our external physical reality.
Which is huge. So in this deep dive, we're going to explore exactly how to adjust your mental thermostat.
We're going to diagnose and cure the ultimate failure disease, which the source material calls excusitis.
Love that term. We'll also look at the physiological mechanisms of fear and how to weaponize action against it. And finally, we will break down practical frameworks for unlocking true creative vision.
So let's start with that baseline operating system of the mind, because if we want to understand how to think big, we first have to understand why some people default to these massive, expansive thoughts while others are trapped in a small, constrained worldview.
Right. It all comes down to belief. But I want to be really careful here because belief is a word that gets hijacked by the woo-woo manifestation crowd a lot.
Oh, constantly. We need to define our terms strictly here. The research is very clear. Belief is not mystical wishful thinking.
Right.
You cannot stand in front of a mountain, close your eyes, cross your fingers, and just wish it away. You can't sit on your couch and wish yourself into a corner office or a 5-bedroom house.
Yeah, that is a fundamental misunderstanding of cognitive psychology.
Exactly. It's passive. And true belief is not passive.
So what does it actually mean mechanically? How does belief function if it isn't just wishing?
Well, belief is an engine. It is a practical neurological mechanism. Think about the reticular activating system, or RAS, in your brain.
Oh, the filter.
Yes, the filter. Your brain is bombarded with millions of bits of information every single second. It has to filter that noise out, otherwise you just go insane from sensory overload.
Right, so it only lets through what you tell it is important.
Exactly. When you fundamentally believe you can do something, you program that filter. The "I'm positive I can't" attitude actually commands your brain to start hunting for the power, the skill, and the energy needed to succeed.
So it's actively scanning reality for solutions.
Precisely. When you believe you can do it, the how to do it develops. The belief comes first. The methodology comes second.
How to do it develops. I really love that phrasing because it shifts belief from a passive state to an active search algorithm.
Yeah, it does.
There's a brilliant example in the material of a young woman who wanted to start a mobile home sales agency. Now, if you look at this on paper, it was a terrible idea.
Let me guess, no experience.
Zero practical experience.
Yeah.
And the market was highly competitive, and she had less than $3,000 in savings. Everyone, all her advisors, told her it was statistically impossible.
And, from a strictly logical arithmetic standpoint, her advisors were completely correct. She lacked capital and she lacked experience. The math just didn't work.
But her belief overrode the math. And here's the crucial distinction. She didn't ignore the obstacles. She wasn't delusional about the money.
Right. She acknowledged the lack of capital.
She did. But she had an absolutely unquestioned belief that she would succeed anyway. She told herself she was going to do a better job merchandising those trailers than anyone else in town.
And because she believed it so completely, her brain's search algorithm kicked into overdrive to figure out the ways and means.
Exactly. That strong, unshakable belief actually won over 2 skeptical investors. And then she used that same infectious certainty to get a trailer manufacturer to advance her a limited inventory with zero money down.
Which is incredibly hard to do.
It is. And in her first year, she sold over $1 million worth of trailers.
What's really fascinating here is how her internal belief altered the external behavior of the people around her.
Oh, absolutely.
Most people don't put much stock in belief, but investors do, suppliers do. We are hardwired to detect confidence.
Yeah, we pick up on those tiny cues, right?
Exactly. When you deeply believe you can succeed, it changes your micro-expressions, your tone of voice, your posture. It makes others place confidence in you. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy, but mechanically so, rooted in human behavioral psychology.
It reminds me of the other detail in the material about the bridge project. So, a state highway department wanted to build 8 bridges for $5 million.
Okay, pretty big project.
Huge. The commission for the engineering firm was $200,000. 21 firms were approached. Now, the 4 massive monolithic firms submitted proposals, of course.
Right, they have the resources.
But 16 of the 17 smaller firms with only 3 to 7 engineers, backed out immediately. They looked at the scope of the project, got scared, and just said, it's too big for us.
They lacked the belief, so their minds immediately shut off the mechanism for finding a solution.
They didn't even try.
No, their reticular activating system literally went blind to any potential strategy because they'd already decided it was impossible.
Exactly. Yeah. But one small firm with only 3 engineers looked at the exact same architectural plans and said, we can do it. They submitted a proposal and they got the job.
Wow.
The mountain didn't change size. The bridges didn't get smaller. The belief of the people looking at the mountain is what changed.
This brings us to a really powerful analogy the author uses to explain how our brains process these everyday situations. Think of your mind as a massive, bustling thought factory.
Okay, a factory.
And this factory is run by two intensely dedicated foremen. One is named Mr. Triumph, and the other is Mr. Defeat.
I can picture them right now. Two guys with clipboards walking the factory floor of my subconscious.
Precisely. Now, Mr. Triumph is the foreman in charge of manufacturing positive thoughts. His entire job description is to produce reasons why you can, why you are qualified, why you will succeed.
He's the guy you want running the shift.
Yes. Mr. Defeat, on the other hand, is your expert in manufacturing reasons why you can't. He specializes in why you are weak, inadequate, and why you are inevitably going to fail.
And what's terrifying to me is that both of these foremen are intensely obedient. They have no moral compass. They just snap to attention the second you give them a signal.
That is the key mechanism. They don't judge the signal, they just execute it. If you wake up and think, ugh, today's going to be a lousy day, you have just paged Mr. Defeat over the factory intercom.
And he goes right to work.
He steps forward and says, "Right away, boss." He immediately gets his assembly line running to manufacture facts that prove you right.
Like, oh, the coffee is cold.
Right. He points out that it's too hot outside, the commute is going to be awful, business will be slow, your spouse gave you a weird look this morning, you might be catching a cold. He is incredibly, ruthlessly efficient.
Before you've even left the house, you are completely sold that it is a terrible day.
Exactly. But if you wake up and say, today is a fine day, you've called on Mr. Triumph. And he immediately gets his workers on the line, bringing you thoughts about how refreshing the cool weather is, how it's a great opportunity to catch up on deep work, how good it is to just be alive and breathing.
And here is the real neuroplastic danger. The more work you give either of these foremen, the stronger they become. Neurons that fire together, wire together.
So true.
If you keep giving Mr. Defeat work, he's going to hire more personnel. He's going to expand his assembly line. He's going to take up more physical real estate in your thought factory.
Yeah, eventually he'll take over the entire manufacturing division and virtually all your baseline default thoughts will be negative.
So what's the advice?
The advice here is ruthless. You have to fire Mr. Defeat. You don't need him. Boot him off the premises.
Okay, let's look at what happens when Mr. Defeat actually takes over. Because if we trace this back to the root, if Mr. Defeat has seized the means of production in your mind, it manifests as a very specific condition. A condition the author calls excusitis, the failure disease.
Excusitis. It is the deadening, paralyzing thought disease found in every single unsuccessful person.
Every single one.
Pretty much. And the research argues that the difference between someone going places and someone barely holding on is almost entirely explained by the severity of the excusitis they suffer from.
Yeah, the successful person doesn't make excuses. The mediocre person has an entire beautifully alphabetized encyclopedia of them.
That's a great way to put it.
And the analysis breaks excusitis down into 4 of its deadliest variants. The first one is incredibly pervasive, health excusitis.
This is a big one.
This ranges from a chronic, vague, I just don't feel good, to very specific phantom ailments.
Health is a very common, very socially acceptable place to hide. Think about it. If you say you aren't smart enough, people might judge you. But if you say you are sick, people offer sympathy.
Right. It's a safe excuse.
But the biological reality is perfect health doesn't exist. Our bodies are constantly in a state of decay and repair. My favorite statistic from the text is from a physician who noted that 3 out of every 4 hospital beds are occupied by people with EII.
Emotionally induced illness.
Yes. Think about the implications of that. 3 out of 4 people who are physically sick would be well if they learned how to manage their emotional and cognitive stress loads.
That is staggering. It's the physiological manifestation of Mr. Defeat. Cortisol flooding the system, creating real inflammation from imaginary threats.
Exactly.
The material contrasts 2 incredible examples to illustrate this. The author meets a worried 30-year-old guy who constantly complains he has a bad heart.
Okay.
He's seen 4 different specialists, and none of them can find a single thing wrong with him. But he's terrified. He refuses to travel, refuses to take on challenging work, holding himself back from life, essentially pitying himself into being a premature invalid.
He is using a hypothetical, unproven health issue to excuse his lack of momentum. It's a shield against the fear of failure.
Exactly. But later that exact same day, the author is on a plane and hears a distinct ticking sound coming from the chest of the guy sitting next to him.
A ticking sound.
Yeah. Turns out this guy just had open heart surgery 21 days prior to have a plastic valve implanted in his heart. The ticking is the actual mechanical valve keeping him alive.
Oh my goodness.
But is this guy making excuses? Is he shrinking from the world? No. He's smiling. He tells the author he has massive plans to study law and get into government work.
That is the stark contrast between health excusitis and an active positive belief system.
It's amazing.
The text also mentions a one-armed golfer who plays at an incredibly high level. When asked how he manages it, he says, "The right attitude and one arm will beat the wrong attitude and two arms every time."
I love that quote.
That is the ultimate cognitive cure for health excusitis. Refuse to talk about your health constantly. Refuse to worry about it. Be genuinely grateful for the functioning biology you do have. And remind yourself of the old adage that it is far better to wear out than to rust out.
Okay, so we cure the health excuse. But here's where I really need to push back. Because the second variant is intelligence excusitis. The excuse of, I lack the brains to succeed. Now, I read this and my immediate reaction was, wait a minute. Raw intelligence absolutely matters in the real world.
Sure it does.
If I am hiring a structural engineer to build a skyscraper or a surgeon to operate on my spine, I don't care how big they think, I want the highest IQ in the room. Surely a 150 IQ gives you a massive, undeniable advantage over a 100 IQ.
It's an excellent point, and it's the exact trap most of us fall into. We assume cognitive horsepower is the sole determinant of output.
Because that's what schools test for.
Exactly. But we make two profound errors here. We severely underestimate our own brain power, and we vastly overestimate the other person's brain power.
Interesting.
Now, to address your pushback, yes, baseline technical competence is required for specialized fields. You don't want an untrained surgeon. But the material reframes the variable of success beautifully. It argues that the thinking that guides your intelligence is infinitely more important than the quantity of your brain power.
The thinking that guides the intelligence, meaning the software running the hardware.
Precisely. You can have a supercomputer, but if it's running a flawed, pessimistic operating system, it will just calculate the probability of failure with incredible speed and accuracy.
Wow.
A person with an average IQ of 100 who possesses a positive, optimistic, cooperative, and resilient attitude will consistently earn more money, win more respect, and achieve more systemic success than a negative, pessimistic individual with an IQ of 120. Stickability is 95% of ability.
Stickability. The story of Chuck perfectly proves this hardware versus software argument.
Poor Chuck.
Yeah, Chuck was a brilliant college grad, graduated with top honors, absolute top-tier intellect. When the author runs into him years later, he assumes Chuck is running an empire. He asks Chuck what business he eventually started.
And what did Chuck say?
Chuck awkwardly admits he never started one. Why? Because Chuck used his massive supercomputer intellect to become an absolute, peerless expert in why a small business would fail.
Right, he could foresee every single pitfall.
Every macroeconomic downturn, every nuanced supply chain disruption. His brain was so powerful and so heavily managed by Mr. Defeat that it completely paralyzed him.
It's tragic.
Meanwhile, his thoroughly average high school friends, who didn't possess his raw intellect, just went ahead, started businesses, made mistakes, corrected them, and succeeded.
Chuck is the classic example of idle intelligence. He used his mental power to mathematically prove why things won't work, rather than directing that immense processing power to search for ways to succeed.
Yeah, it's a huge waste.
The material also brings up Einstein. When Einstein was famously asked how many feet are in a mile, he said he didn't know.
Really?
Yeah. He argued why should it fill his brain with static facts he can find in a standard reference book in 2 minutes?
Right, and Henry Ford did the exact same thing. Ford was actually sued for libel by a newspaper that had printed an article calling him an ignoramus.
Oh, I remember this story.
On the witness stand, the newspaper's lawyers bombarded Ford with obscure trivia questions to prove to the jury that he was uneducated. Finally, Ford gets exasperated, points at the lawyer and says, "I don't know the answers to those questions, but I could find a man in 5 minutes who does."
Boom. Ford understood implicitly that the ability to think, to synthesize information, and to find answers is infinitely more valuable than using your prefrontal cortex as a storage garage for miscellaneous trivia. You don't get paid for what you memorize, you get paid for the complex problems you solve.
So if you're out there listening and you're employing Mr. Defeat to whisper that you aren't smart enough, fire him. Your hardware is fine. You need to update the software.
Well said.
Now, the third variant of excusitis is age excusitis, being too old or too young.
This one is incredibly insidious because it appeals directly to our sense of societal norms. We're constantly bombarded by 30 under 30 lists or articles implying that if you haven't made it by 40, you are washed up.
It creates a collective chronological anxiety.
It really does. But let's look at the actual mathematics of human lifespan provided in the analysis. Take Cecil, a 40-year-old man who desperately wanted to change careers and become a manufacturer's representative, but he felt he was way too old to start from scratch.
Right. So the author sits Cecil down and asks him a simple question. When does a man's highly productive life begin? Cecil thinks about it and says, around 20.
Okay.
When does it generally end? Cecil says around 70. So the author points out that's 50 deeply productive years. At 40, Cecil has only used 20 of those years.
He still has 30 years left.
Exactly. He hasn't even reached the halfway point of his productive life. He's only burned through 40%.
By simply reframing the math, Cecil was cured. He realized age is an attitude, a psychological construct, much more than a biological hard stop. The brain's neuroplasticity doesn't just switch off at 40.
And this works on the flip side, too.
I'm thinking about Jerry.
The young guy. Yeah, Jerry was 23 years old and was offered a massive promotion to sales manager. But he was absolutely terrified because all the men he'd be managing were 7 to 21 years older than him.
That is intimidating.
But the cure there is to realize that youth is only a liability if you internally believe it is. If you approach the role with maturity, competence, and respect, the chronological age becomes totally irrelevant.
Which brings us to the final and maybe the most frustrating variant to encounter in the wild, luck excusitis.
Oh, I hear this one all the time.
The delusion that success is just a lottery ticket drawn from a hat. You see a coworker get a massive promotion or a competitor land a huge client, and the immediate defensive thought is, man, they just have all the luck.
Right, it's who you know, or they were just in the right place at the right time excuse. It's a defense mechanism to protect our own egos.
Exactly. The material tells the story of John, a highly effective salesman who lands a massive $112,000 order. Another struggling salesman hears the news and immediately says, well, John, you're lucky again.
But the reality beneath the surface, John had been working on that specific account for months. He had stayed up late, engineering preliminary designs. He had networked to talk to a half dozen different stakeholders at the client's company. He had anticipated their objections.
He did the work.
He didn't get lucky. He executed a patient, meticulously engineered plan. Preparation met opportunity.
Exactly. If luck truly determines success, the global economy would collapse tomorrow.
Right.
Imagine a Fortune 500 company reorganizing their entire executive suite by just drawing employee names out of a barrel. It's absurd. Success is the rigid law of cause and effect. Relentless preparation and positive, expansive thinking always proceed what the outside world lazily labels as good fortune.
So to you, the learner listening right now, here is a moment for application. I want you to look back at this past week. Which foreman have you been employing the most? Mr. Triumph or Mr. Defeat?
It's a tough question to ask yourself.
Have you been letting excusitis creep into your project planning, your personal goals, your workouts? It's time to identify those symptoms. Because if excusitis is the symptom, the cough, the fever, we need to talk about the root cause.
That transition is critical because if you peel back the layers of excusitis, you don't find a logic problem. People don't make excuses because they are bad at math. You find an emotional problem. You find a nervous system in panic mode.
The underlying infection is almost always fear.
Yes. People make excuses because fundamentally they are terrified, afraid of failing, afraid of what their peers will think, afraid of the sheer vulnerability of the unknown.
So how do we dismantle that fear? If fear is an infection, what is the antibiotic? The research is definitive on this point, and it's profoundly practical. The antidote to fear is action.
And we have to start by validating that fear is real. It is a physiological event. Your amygdala is firing, your heart rate is elevating, your palms are sweating.
You feel it in your chest.
You do. When friends mean well and say, oh, it's all in your mind, just relax, don't worry about it, it is terrible advice. That doesn't cure a psychological infection any more than telling someone an inflamed appendix is all in their body cures appendicitis.
That's a great comparison.
Fear stops people from capitalizing on opportunity. It wears down physical vitality. And as we discussed with EII, it actually makes people physically ill.
But action cures it. And indecision fertilizes it. The analysis uses a brilliant detail from World War II to illustrate this mechanism. The Navy required all new recruits to learn how to swim.
Okay.
They would put these young, healthy guys up on a diving board, 6 feet in the air over 8 feet of water. And these guys were absolutely terrified. Their nervous systems were screaming that this is a lethal threat.
The fear was incredibly real.
Very real. But the instant they were accidentally pushed off the board or forced to jump, the fear was defeated. The physical drop into the water cured the psychological fear of the water.
Because it's the hesitation that magnifies the fear. When you hesitate, your brain runs catastrophic simulations. What if I hit the water wrong? What if I drown?
Right, you spiral.
But the moment you take action, your brain is forced to deal with reality, and reality is rarely as catastrophic as the simulation.
I think about this every time I'm sitting in a dentist's waiting room. You are sitting there, flipping through a 3-year-old magazine, listening to the high-pitched whine of the drill coming through the wall.
Oh, the worst sound.
Your heart is pounding, you're sweating, your mind is racing. The dread in the waiting room is almost always 100 times worse than the actual procedure. But the moment you sit in the chair and the dentist actually starts working, the waiting room panic vanishes. Action is the antibiotic for the infection of fear.
The author provides a highly relatable business application of this. A retail buyer in his early 40s comes to him in a total panic. His department's sales are down 7%, while the store's overall sales are up 6%. He feels like he's drowning.
That's a bad spot to be in.
He is absolutely certain he's going to be fired. He's paralyzed by the fear of losing his livelihood, just sitting in his office hoping for the best.
But hope isn't a strategy, and it certainly isn't an antibiotic. The author tells him to take immediate action. Stop ruminating and move.
They tell him what to do.
Yeah. Have a special sale, rearrange the physical displays, go talk to the merchandise manager honestly to buy some time, and crucially, start holding daily sales meetings with his team to inject some enthusiasm and momentum.
And what happened?
The buyer took action. He broke the paralysis. He started holding those daily meetings. His team sensed his renewed energy and pushed harder. His sales went up, beating the store average. He even got 2 other job offers because he put out feelers in the market.
Wow. The physical action shifted his brain from the fear center of the amygdala back to the executive functioning of the prefrontal cortex. Action broke the paralysis.
But how do we manage the internal fear? Not the situational fear of losing a job or jumping off a board, but the chronic fears that stem from our own memories. The research introduces this concept of managing the bank teller of your memory. We talked about the 2 foremen earlier, and now we have a bank teller.
This is a powerful psychological framework for dealing with state-dependent memory. Your brain is essentially a bank. Every single day, you deposit thoughts, experiences, and reactions.
Right.
When you face a new problem, you implicitly go to the memory teller and say, what do I know about this kind of situation? Now, if your default state is fear, you ask the teller, give me memories of why I am inferior.
And the teller just hands them over.
Gladly hands over every time you failed, every time you were embarrassed in a meeting, every negative comment a teacher made to you in the 6th grade.
Unsuccessful people are constantly withdrawing negative, self-deprecating memories. They take their embarrassing moments and replay them like a highlight reel before they go to sleep. They ruminate.
Yes, and the material warns that this constant rumination creates mental monsters. A psychologist in the text explains that most maladjusted, deeply unhappy people are essentially operating a private museum of mental horror.
A private museum of mental horror. That's a dark image.
It is. They take a slight disappointment, maybe a less than perfect vacation or a mildly awkward conversation, and they reflect on it hundreds of times. They feed it attention until it becomes a giant, relationship-destroying monster.
The story of the painting perfectly captures this. The psychologist had a client suffering from severe depression. He showed her a beautiful, slightly ambiguous oil painting of a sun low on the horizon over a rocky coastline.
Okay, sounds nice.
Now, most people look at it and see a sunrise, the dawn of a new day, hope, beginnings. But the depressed client looked at it and immediately said, it looks like there will be a terrible thunderstorm tonight. She saw a gloomy sunset.
Because she constantly withdrew negative thoughts from her memory bank, her entire present reality was colored by pessimism.
To cure this, you have to consciously manage the teller. You must consciously deposit and withdraw only positive thoughts. You have to actively starve the mental monsters until they shrivel.
When you remember an event, force your brain to concentrate on the good part. If you find yourself drifting to the negative, literally force your mind to change the subject. Your mind actually wants to forget the unpleasant. Evolutionarily, it wants to heal. You just have to cooperate with it instead of picking at the psychological scab.
So we've got action for situational fear, and memory management for internal fear. But what about the biggest, most visceral fear of all? The fear of other people.
Social anxiety.
Why are we so terrified of what our boss thinks, or the audience we are presenting to, or the big client?
We fear people because we fail to put them in the proper perspective. We put them on a pedestal. We forget that they are fundamentally biological creatures just like us.
The Army medic story is the absolute perfect equalizer here. A guy who used to be terrified of people gets stationed as a medic at an induction center during World War II.
Doing physicals.
Exactly. Day after day, he watches hundreds of men line up naked for their physicals.
Yeah.
And he realizes something profound. When you strip away the tailored suits, the greasy overalls, the intimidating job titles, everyone looks exactly the same.
They're all just guys.
They're all confused, all a little cold, all a little lonesome. The rising young executive and the humble farmer standing naked in a line are identical. Think about your next high-stakes Zoom presentation. Just imagine everyone on the call is in their pajamas.
It demystifies the other. If you truly internalize that the other person is basically like you, they like good food, they miss their family, they have deep-seated insecurities, there is no logical reason to be terrified of them.
And when someone is acting terribly towards you, how do you handle it without losing your confidence? Because that's a real fear, the fear of confrontation.
Definitely.
The material shares a scene at a Memphis hotel. A guest comes to the front desk and just unleashes a verbal tornado on the young clerk. "Do you know where I am? I'll have you fired. This place is a dump." Just awful, degrading behavior over a minor room mix-up.
Sounds like a nightmare customer.
But the clerk stays perfectly calm, incredibly polite. Afterward, the author asks the clerk how he kept his temper and his confidence intact.
And the clerk's response is a masterclass in emotional intelligence and cognitive empathy. He says, "He really isn't mad at me. I was just the scapegoat. The poor fellow may be in bad trouble with his wife, or his business might be failing, and this was his golden chance to feel important and in control."
Wow.
The clerk adds, "Underneath, he's probably a very nice guy."
Underneath, he's probably a very nice guy.
By realizing the anger wasn't actually about him, the clerk protected his own confidence. He didn't let the customer's raging insecurities puncture his own self-worth. He depersonalized the attack entirely.
Which leads us to a very internal, often overlooked component of confidence, your conscience. There's a fascinating connection the analysis draws between ethical behavior, doing what is right, and maintaining the psychological power to think big. Right? The story of Paul, the college student. He cheated on an exam. He got away with it in the moment. But when the professor called him in later just to discuss his grades, Paul didn't know he hadn't been caught.
Oh, he panicked.
He just completely fell to pieces on his own. He confessed, started crying about how it would wreck his life. The guilt just crushed him.
And the professor points out something profound. This isn't just a Sunday school moral lecture. It's highly practical psychology. When you do something you fundamentally know is wrong, your conscience bothers you. This creates a massive guilt complex. And guilt is an absolute cancer to confidence. It introduces a massive cognitive load to your brain.
Because your mind is constantly running a background program asking, will I get caught? Do they know? Did I leave a trail?
Exactly. You literally cannot think straight because a portion of your processing power is dedicated to managing the lie. The professor tells Paul, imagine you mislead a customer to make a big sale. You might get the commission today, but the next time you see that customer, you'll be self-conscious, ill at ease, constantly wondering if they figured out the deception.
You'll lose your edge.
You'll lose the repeat business because your presentation will be weak and defensive. Doing what is right is a practical neurological necessity for maintaining the self-respect required to command a room and think big.
Okay, so let's get highly actionable for you, the listener. The research provides 5 physical hacks to force your brain into a state of confidence. Because, as the psychologist William James famously noted, motions are the precursors to emotions.
Embodied cognition.
Exactly. If you act confident, you will signal to your nervous system to feel confident.
First, be a front-seater. Notice how people scramble for the back row in corporate meetings or classrooms to avoid being conspicuous.
Always.
Sitting up front builds confidence. It breaks the habit of hiding and signals to your brain that you belong in the mix.
Second, make eye contact. Looking away screams, I feel inferior, or I have something to hide. Aim your eyes right at the other person. It tells them you are honest and confident, and it tells your own brain that you are an equal.
Third, walk 25% faster. Psychologists heavily link sluggish walking to unpleasant attitudes toward oneself. The extremely beaten people shuffle. Average people have an average meandering pace.
Right.
But super confident people walk faster as if they have somewhere important to be and something important to do when they get there. Throw your shoulders back, lift your head, and add a little sprint to your step. It physically elevates your heart rate and changes your hormonal state.
Fourth, speak up in meetings. The conference clam who sits there silently is taking a dose of confidence poison every time they fail to speak. They internally reinforce the idea that their opinion is worthless.
Just say something.
Break the ice. Ask a question, make a comment. Be the first one to wade in, even if it's just to agree with someone else's point. Just get your voice in the room.
And fifth, smile big. Not a half smile, not a smirk. Smile until your teeth show. A big, genuine smile beats fear, rolls away worry, and instantly melts the opposition of others. Physiologically, you literally cannot feel defeated and smile a genuine, big smile at the exact same time. The facial feedback hypothesis proves that the muscle movement actually triggers the release of endorphins.
Okay, let's take a breath. We have recalibrated our belief thermostat. We've identified and vaccinated ourselves against the 4 variants of excusitis. We've learned that action is the physiological antibiotic for fear.
We have a clean mental slate.
Now, how do we actively construct big thoughts? This brings us to the mechanics of creative vision.
Having a clean slate isn't enough. You must know what to build on it. And building big thoughts requires a fundamental shift in vocabulary. This is rooted in linguistic relativity, the idea that the words we use actually shape our perception of reality.
How so?
We don't actually think in words, we think in images. Words are just the projectors that cast the movie onto the screen of your mind.
I love that projector analogy. It makes language feel so much more tactile.
It completely changes how you communicate. If you say, "we failed," you are projecting a mental movie of grief, darkness, and irreversible defeat, both for yourself and your team.
Yeah, you picture the doors closing.
But if you say, "here's a new approach," you project a movie of hope, forward momentum, and curiosity. Small thinkers use words that limit and constrain. Big thinkers use words that expand and illuminate.
For example, instead of saying, "we incurred an expense," which sounds like money lost forever, a wound to the budget, you say, "we made an investment," which creates a psychological picture of future profit and delayed gratification.
Right.
Instead of, "I've tried, but the product won't sell," you say, "I haven't found the right formula yet, but I will." It's about consciously choosing the projector reel.
And this leads directly into the core tenet of thinking big, seeing what can be, not just what is.
Now, I could hear a listener right now saying, "Okay, that sounds great on a motivational poster, look on the bright side, but how does this actually apply in hardcore, cutthroat business negotiations or building a career?"
It applies through the mechanism of adding value through visualization. It is a highly practical, deeply economic strategy.
Let's look at the real estate agent from the analysis. He specializes in rural property. Usually these are run-down, ugly, abandoned farms. If he tries to sell the farm exactly as it is, just overgrown acreage and a broken-down house, nobody wants it. The market value is 0. So what does he do?
He spends 2 days walking the property, studying the nearby highways, looking at the demographics of the neighboring towns, and he asks himself, what is this farm realistically good for?
He looks past the mess.
He doesn't look at the physical reality of the rotting wood. He looks at the economic potential.
He draws up 3 comprehensive typed plans. One converts the farm into a riding stable, showing the economics of city folks wanting weekend recreation. Another is a tree farm. Another is a poultry farm. When he pitches the client, he isn't selling a rundown farm. He is selling a turnkey, money-making business idea.
And because he is selling a vision of what can be, people gladly pay a higher price for the property, and his commission is massively larger.
Visualization literally added financial value to the dirt. We see this in modern business constantly. The text tells a story of a department store executive who overheard a salesperson refusing to help a difficult customer, saying, "I'm not going to let a $1.98 customer take up all my time."
The classic small thinker mistake, focusing only on the immediate transaction.
The executive realized this was a toxic mindset that would kill the business. She had her research director calculate the average annual spend of a loyal customer. It turned out to be $362.
A big difference from $2.
She called a meeting and showed the staff that they weren't dealing with a $1.98 transaction. They were dealing with a $362 annual asset. Putting a big lifetime value on the customer fundamentally changes the level of service you provide, which in turn secures the repeat business that actually generates profit. It's early customer acquisition cost and lifetime value math.
It's the exact difference between the blind milkman and the visionary one. The young milkman refused to stop at a house because they only bought 1 quart of milk every 2 days. Not worth my time, he says. He only saw what was.
But he missed the big picture.
He totally failed to notice that the family was expecting a new baby. A few years later, a different milkman who had the foresight to secure the account is selling them 7 quarts every 2 days for a growing family of 5. It's like a modern tech company ignoring a small-tier subscriber, completely failing to realize that subscriber is a rapidly scaling startup that will need enterprise software in 12 months.
And this visualization applies to yourself, most importantly. The material highlights a young rate clerk. He has less than $200 in the bank, drives a 4-year-old car, and lives in a cramped, cheap apartment. But he explicitly states, "I'm determined not to let what I haven't got stop me."
Meanwhile, his neighbor just complains about the bad plumbing and the low pay, acting as if he is genetically sentenced to that life forever.
But the young clerk refuses to look at himself as he physically is today. He says, "I see myself not as a rate clerk, but as an executive. I don't see a crummy apartment. I see a fine new suburban home."
He's projecting the future.
By visualizing himself as the executive he will become, he acts like an executive today. He dresses better, he thinks bigger, he handles conflict with more grace, and he performs his current duties with executive precision.
Which perfectly bridges us into how we generate these visions in the first place. Let's talk about creative thinking, because for a lot of people, creativity is locked away in a box reserved for painters, poets, or NASA engineers.
The analysis aggressively redefines creativity. It is simply finding new, improved ways to do absolutely anything. A low-income family finding a creative financing structure to pay for a leading university is creative thinking. Figuring out how to break a cycle of recurring arguments with your spouse by changing your communication style is creative thinking.
And the biggest enemy of this kind of creative thinking is traditional thinking. The fatal phrase, "We've always done it this way, so it must be the best way." To break this cognitive lock, the author uses a wild thought experiment. He asks a room full of people, is it possible to eliminate jails within the next 30 years?
And the initial reaction is always extreme, visceral resistance.
Oh, people go crazy. You want murderers running loose, society would collapse, some people are born criminals, it's human nature.
They spend 10 minutes brilliantly proving why it's absolutely impossible.
Their minds are working diligently, employing Mr. Defeat to support their disbelief. They are defending the status quo.
But then the author shifts the parameters. He says, okay, do me a favor. Just for kicks, just as an academic exercise, assume we can eliminate jails. How would we begin?
The shift in the room's energy is instantaneous.
Once they are forced to believe it can be done, their minds release tremendous creative power. They stop defending the past and start engineering the future. They start suggesting community youth centers, poverty elimination programs, medical research to spot neurodivergent tendencies early, radical educational reform. They generate 78 specific, brilliant social and economic ideas.
The lesson is profound. Belief releases creative powers. Disbelief puts the brakes on. When you believe something is impossible, your mind works to prove you right. When you believe it can be done, your mind finds the way.
Now, I want to push back on one aspect of the book's creative thinking philosophy. The text talks a lot about increasing your capacity, constantly asking, how can I do more? In today's hyper-connected hustle culture, doesn't that just lead straight to burnout? Is the answer really just to grind harder and sleep less?
That's a vital distinction and a very modern concern. The text explicitly says it is not about working harder or redlining your physical engine. It is about working creatively. The exact quote is, "Capacity is a state of mind."
Okay, unpack that state of mind for me. How do we increase capacity without burning out?
Let's look at the bank executive from the source material. A colleague leaves abruptly, and the VP asks this executive if he can temporarily handle the departed colleague's massive workload on top of his own. Now, if he just tried to grind harder, he would have burned out in a week. He would have worked 80-hour weeks until his health broke.
Right.
But he accepted the challenge and then asked himself, how can I increase my personal efficiency?
He used creative thinking on his own workflow. He upgraded the system.
Exactly. He sat down with a pencil and ruthlessly restructured everything. He batched his dictation to one highly focused hour a day. He limited meetings from an open-ended 15 minutes to a strict 10 minutes. He delegated routine, low-impact phone calls to his secretary.
He streamlined it all.
He didn't double his working hours. He reorganized his approach. He found extreme efficiencies, handled both jobs flawlessly, and eventually the bank realized he could do both permanently, combined the roles, and gave him a massive raise. He proved that how much you can do depends almost entirely on how much you think you can do.
That's a great frame. It's about upgrading the software, not just revving the hardware until it breaks. There's also the woman with the 4 hardware stores. She didn't get to that level of scale just by waking up earlier and sweeping the floors herself. She dedicates 4 hours every single Monday night purely to a weekly improvement program.
4 hours just to think.
She sits down in a quiet room and asks one relentless question. How can I do it better? How can I attract more kids to the store so the parents come in? How can I rearrange the displays to increase foot traffic flow? She forces herself to systematically generate creative improvements.
How can I do it better? When you ask that exact question, your creative power switches on. It relies on the assumption that absolute perfection is unattainable, which means there is endless, infinite room for improvement in everything we do.
So we are thinking big internally. We are crushing excuses. We are visualizing potential and upgrading our capacity. But we don't live in a vacuum. Thinking big internally has to spill over into how we interact with the world around us, how we manage our environment, and how we lead others.
Your mind is an amazing mechanism, but it is ultimately an input-output machine. It produces output based heavily on the input it receives from its environment. Just as we are hyper-vigilant against food poisoning, we check expiration dates, we smell the milk, we must be equally vigilant against thought poison.
Thought poison, emotional contagion, gossip, petty thinking, the constant drone of negativity in the break room.
Humans are incredibly susceptible to emotional contagion. If you associate with people who think small, who are constantly concerned with petty grievances, office politics, and tearing others down, you'll inevitably shrink to fit their environment. You absorb their limitations osmotically.
The material has a great rule for this. Go first class. Go first class in everything you do, but especially in who you ask for advice. If you want to know how to succeed in business, don't ask the guy who has failed at 3 businesses and loudly blames the economy. Ask a failure how to succeed, and you'll just get a masterclass in excusitis.
It sounds harsh, but it's psychological self-preservation. You must meticulously select friends and associates who are interested in positive things, who breathe encouragement into your plans, and who challenge you to think bigger.
And as you manage your environment, you also have to manage how you project your own attitudes into that environment. The research identifies specific attitudes of success. The first one really struck me because it's so simple but so rare. The "you are important" attitude.
This taps into fundamental human psychology. Everyone, from the billionaire CEO to the night shift mailroom clerk, craves to feel important. It is a baseline psychological need.
There's an anecdote about a guy riding a bus. The driver is doing an incredible job keeping a tight schedule in heavy traffic. As the passenger gets off, he stops and says, "You sure keep this thing on schedule. Great driving." He essentially made the bus driver feel like an airline pilot. And the driver, in return, beamed with pride and showed special courtesy. When you make people feel important, they care about you. And when they care about you, they do vastly better work for you.
It works in an office environment identically. The administrative assistant you treat with genuine respect is the one who goes out of their way to rush your paperwork so you can close a deal. The employee you praise for a small, routine task feels necessary, feels seen, and naturally does increasingly better work. Big thinkers always add value to people by treating them as if they are already at their absolute best.
The second attitude is the service-first attitude. This is the ultimate antidote to the transactional zero-sum mindset. Give people more than they expect to get, and the money will take care of itself. The text uses an agricultural metaphor. Money is the harvest, service is the seed. You can't just stand in an empty field and demand the harvest. You have to plant the seeds of extra service, new ideas, and exceptional effort first.
If you put service first, the economics naturally, inevitably follow. But you must initiate the value creation. You have to take the first step.
Which brings us to the ultimate application of all this. Leadership. The analysis gives us what I think is a brilliant, profound leadership hack. It's called trading minds with the people you want to influence.
To truly influence someone, you have to understand exactly how they perceive the situation. You have to literally put yourself in their mental shoes. It requires deep cognitive empathy, theory of mind.
The example of Ted B., the advertising executive, is perfect here. Ted was tasked with creating television commercials for children's shoes. But his first massive campaign completely bombed. Sales didn't move at all. Why? Because he wrote the commercials for adults. He was using his adult brain, talking about leather durability, arch support, and price points.
He hadn't traded minds with his actual target audience. He was broadcasting his own values.
Exactly. So he pivoted. He traded minds with kids. He remembered what it was actually like to be a kid. Kids don't care about leather durability. They care about fun, adventure, and secrets. So he developed a campaign where a shiny plastic pirate coin was hidden in the toe of every shoebox. He created a whole theme around finding the hidden treasure. The commercial spoke directly to the child's mind, and sales absolutely skyrocketed.
He stopped projecting his own worldview and started aggressively listening to the worldview of the people he needed to move. This principle of listening is a hallmark of big thinkers. Big people monopolize the listening, small people monopolize the talking.
Let that sink in.
Yeah.
Small people monopolize the talking.
Think about the milk processing vice president at the management seminar detailed in the text. It's his turn to give a 15-minute presentation to a room full of other high-level executives on how he solved a major management problem. A small thinker would use that time to brag, to show off how smart he was, to stroke his own ego, and to prove he belonged in the room.
But what does the VP do?
He stands up and says, "Needed. Help on solving my most pressing management problem." He briefly outlines his core operational issue and then turns it over, asking the room for ideas. He even brought a stenographer to write down every single suggestion. He used his platform not to broadcast his ego, but to harvest raw, brilliant material from other minds. He traded his ego for massive, actionable value.
He knew that ideas are the raw material of creative decisions. By asking and listening, he multiplied his own brain power by the dozen executives in the room. He tapped into their supercomputers.
And as a massive side benefit, he made everyone in that room feel incredibly important by genuinely valuing their advice. It is a masterful, multi-layered demonstration of thinking big in a leadership role.
All right, as we wrap up this deep dive for you, the learner out there, let's synthesize the incredible journey we've just been on. We started by realizing that success isn't a strict linear mathematical equation of IQ and sweat. It's heavily dictated by the thermostat of your belief and how effectively you utilize your brain's search algorithms. We learned how to identify the symptoms of excusitis and how to fire Mr. Defeat from our mental factory before he takes over the assembly line.
We explored how fear is a very real physiological infection, and that physical action, not passive overthinking, is the only effective antibiotic. We discussed how to manage your memory bank to avoid rumination, and how to conquer the fear of others by recognizing our shared fundamental humanity.
We tackled creative vision, learning to change our vocabulary to project images of hope and victory rather than loss. We realized the profound economic power of seeing what can be. And we learned that capacity expands not by grinding harder, but by asking, how can I do it better?
And finally, we looked at how to fiercely protect our environment from thought poison while projecting attitudes of importance and service onto others. We saw that true leadership requires cognitive empathy trading minds and monopolizing the listening.
So here is your call to action. I challenge you to look at your life today. Identify one single area, a stalled project at work, a frustrating relationship, a financial goal that feels out of reach where you are stuck staring at what is. I want you to consciously shift your projector. Ask yourself what can be, and write down 3 specific ways to add value to that situation.
And as you do that, I want to leave you with a final provocative thought derived from the research. We spend so much of our lives worrying about how the external world evaluates us. We wait for someone else to tell us what we are worth. But the psychological truth is, the world places a price tag on us that is almost exactly identical to the one we put on ourselves. If you were secretly discounting your own value, if you were running a clearance sale in your own mind, why should anyone else pay full price?
It all comes back to that broken equation we talked about at the very beginning. We thought the universe just passively measures our inputs and assigns us a result. But the machine isn't broken. We were just reading the dials wrong. The universe isn't measuring your sweat or your IQ. It's reading the price tag you printed for yourself. It's time to rewrite your own price tag. Think big, and the entire equation changes.